What up, y'all? It's the homie Dame, and My Hero Academia has finally ended after 430 chapters of the manga. Well, I don't know if you can call it much of an ending. I guess it's an ending in the literal sense, since there are no more chapters left, unless we get an announcement for Dekuto, My Hero Academia Next Generations. But I digress, because the purpose of this video is not to clown, but to celebrate. Like the video I did with Kaguya-sama, when a big series like this ends, I think it's best to look back with fondness and celebrate the good things, right? Regardless of how things ended up in the end. Because, you know, maybe the real one for all was the friends we made along the way. Even if said friends don't really have time to hang out anymore, but you know, whatever, let's get into it. I still remember when My Hero Academia first released its first chapter back in 2014 or whenever it was. It was the new hyped shonen on the block, and it was almost immediately a commercial and critical success. It's kind of crazy to think it's been like 10 years since then. Y'all know I'm old as hell, so to me, My Hero Academia is still the new kid on the block. So it's kind of crazy to see some of you kids on TikTok calling it a boomer series. But anyway, while the manga was definitely a success, things got really crazy when the anime dropped in 2016. I don't know if you can say that this was the definitive thing that brought the series into the spotlight, but definitely played a role. The first Blu-ray was 5th in first week sales, and the first season still holds a 100% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. That means something to somebody. But I think the big thing to note about the anime was how big it got in the West, specifically in the good old USA. I think the anime hit at the perfect time when the MCU and superhero movies in general were at their absolute peak, so people were just fiending for more superhero media. Because think about the other things that are popular in the West too, shit like Harry Potter or other kid or young adult fiction where it's like super teens saving the world and all that. Combine that with a bit of nostalgia for Western cartoons like Teen Titans or Young Justice, and even movies like Sky High, and you have the perfect audience for something like My Hero Academia. I remember the first time I knew this series was popping off was when my daughter's school friends were over and I heard them talking about the show. Now, not to stereotype or anything, but aside from my daughter, these were the type of girls who watched like Teen Wolf. So the fact that they were talking about not only just a cartoon, but a weird Japanese one at that didn't even have an English dub yet, if I remember correctly, I mean, that was just mind-blowing. And I feel like a lot of people in the West had the same reaction, judging by how popular the series got. I don't really have any evidence to support this, but from what I've seen, it's shows like My Hero Academia and stuff like Attack on Titan 2 that really ushered in this modern renaissance of anime in the West. There are a lot of YouTubers out there whose careers popped off after reacting to My Hero Academia or just covering it in some way. And plus, you see how big the fan fiction and fan art community is, and the shipping community, and I think no one can deny the impact that the series has had. This is something to be celebrated. No matter how you feel about My Hero Academia, I think you should be happy for the success of the series if you're a fan of the medium of anime at all. The success of this series is one of many that shows how wide the appeal of anime is in places that aren't named Japan. So again, regardless of what you think of this series, you know, clap it up for the effort that Horikoshi and his staff put in, as well as the animators and staff at Studio Bones and everyone who worked on this series in general. People put a lot of work into giving us one of the defining anime of the 2010s, and now that it's over, we should commend their efforts and the impact they had on our anime/manga community. But let's talk about the meat of this series itself, yeah? For me personally, it's pretty simple. Early My Hero Academia up to the Camino Ward arc, amazing. Best of the best, and it's a perfect showcase of all the good stuff that a Shonen Jump series has to offer. It's, as the kids say, peak shonen. Then after that, it's a slow fall off up until the war arc, which is, you know, fine for a bit before it drops off a cliff again at the end. And I feel like this is pretty close to the general consensus as well. I know people still think My Hero Academia was doing its thing, firing on all cylinders up into the Yakuza arc with Overhaul, or even up into the My Villain Academia stuff, but me personally, I was pretty checked out by then. The thing is, My Hero Academia had a great concept and so many good creative of things going for it. Those first few arcs had a super gripping narrative and a really good sense of progression to go along with it, which, you know, is the kind of thing we like to see in shonen series. Deku, despite what people say, is the perfect protagonist to showcase these kind of things. He's very much the textbook zero to hero, and in my opinion, it works really well. But what really made My Hero Academia great is its cast of characters. So many unique individuals with unique designs and unique powers, many of whom have become iconic in their own right, some even becoming as loved or more loved than the main cast. Even just the idea of quirks and how the series delves into how such a power system would affect modern society is a great concept. The series asks some real questions that you wouldn't think a children's series like this would go into. Like, what role should exceptional individuals play in society? How would having superpowers affect organized crime? And even touching on discrimination and prejudice and how those things would work in a world where people can look like a normal anime boy or a literal orca. But this is also where the flaws come into play because, in my opinion, My Hero Academia shoots for the stars and aims big, but rarely hits the mark. It raises so many questions and doesn't answer them, and it sets up so many interesting and exciting things but doesn't deliver. Again, in my opinion. So let's talk about the ending a little bit, yeah? Because that's where things really get, you know, not so plus ultra. Okay, so long story short, All for One and Shigaraki are defeated, and to do that, Deku needed to pass on One for All, leaving him only with the embers, just like All Might. Overall, the climactic fight was pretty cool from like an action standpoint, and it definitely felt like a climactic fight in the sense that the scale of the danger was high, with all of Japan turning into an apocalypse scene, and the villains actually seeming threatening. Almost every character got a cool moment to shine, and we got a bunch of memorable stuff like Bakugo fighting All for One, the bootleg Avengers Endgame portal sequence, and of course all the stuff with the Todoroki family. That's all fine, it's whatever, it's great, and I don't really mind the ending either where Deku tries to talk no jutsu Shigaraki. I would have been fine if they chose the redemption route and Shigaraki survived, but I also like that Horikoshi chose to kill him off because it still fits the theme of this series about saving people because he ended up being redeemed at the end. So all of that was fine. Now, let's talk about the epilogue. I know a lot of people had problems with this, and I'm one of them, but I'll start off with the stuff I wasn't mad at. First and foremost, I don't care that nothing happened between Midoriya and Uraraka. That was never a central part of My Hero Academia for me, and Horikoshi himself seemed like he was reluctant to put it in. If it weren't for the fact that a series like this needs the trope of a cute waifu blushing over the main character, I feel like things could have just been 100% platonic for them and it wouldn't have changed a thing. She's still just his good friend like Bakugo, Ida, or Todoroki. Second, I'm fine that Deku lost One for All, and actually I was one of those who supported the theory that this would happen back when people were theorizing how the series would end. It just seems poetic, you know, he starts out quirkless and ends up quirkless. Because the whole point of the series is that anyone can be a hero regardless of what dumb anime powers they have. Third, I'm fine that Deku ended up being a school teacher, which is apparently something people are upset with. Like, before the series actually ended, people were memeing that he'd end up working at McDonald's or being some bum salaryman while his friends went off to do cool hero shit, which low-key kind of happened. But the fact that he ended up as a teacher specifically makes it worth it, because again, the point of the story isn't about having a crazy quirk or being out there fighting supervillains. The point is anyone can make a difference, and everyone has to do their part to make the future better. And what better way to do that than by being a teacher that literally mentors the next generation? This is like the most non-issue thing for me about the ending. I'm actually kind of blown that people were upset about that, but to be fair, you know, most of it's probably just joking around. Okay, so those were some common problems that I was actually fine with. Now the stuff I didn't like. Number one, I don't like the time skip. Or I should say, I don't like that the time skip was so far forward. At the very least, we should have had one mini time skip for the main cast in their final years of school, then we can have the 8-year time skip. Considering the series is called My Hero Academia, you'd think it'd spend more time on how the rest of high school went for them. Actually, now that I think about it, this is probably the biggest problem with the ending and maybe the series as a whole. It might be too late to even mention this, and you know, hindsight is 2020, but why rush through the entire story over the course of their first school year anyway? Like, I know in real life a lot of stuff can happen your freshman year of high school, like I tried shrooms for the first time, and someone from the GDs tried to shoot at me at a Harold's Chicken Shack, but I didn't go through an entire shonen storyline or anything. But think about how Harry Potter did it. I personally hate that series with my entire soul, and fuck J.K. Rowling too, but the way each book covered a school year for our main cast was a pretty logical way to do things. That leaves a lot of room for growth so we can get to know the characters and have things develop at a natural pace. For My Hero Academia, all you need is 3 years instead of 7, so I mean. Number 2. I don't like that All Might is still alive. He's looked like 1 foot in the grave for 200 chapters. Just let that man die. Like, what's the point of leaving things to the next generation if his ass is still around doing stuff? Like, what does he even do now? Does he have savings? A pension? Is he still living off his hero salary or like his merch sales? I guess they still show him taking an active role in superhero society, but like, why? And when I say why, I mean why in a narrative sense. Is it because a feeble, weakened All Might is a much more crushing image to the morale of society than an All Might that died in a blaze of glory? If that's the case, it didn't work because he was still out there doing stuff during the final battle and no one really lost respect for him. Just let that motherfucker die. In fact, a lot of people should be dead for the sake that it would make the narrative more impactful. Headshot should have died to give Bakugo more purpose for living. Eraserhead should have died to inspire Class 1A. Sero should have died so no one would have to look at his dumbass face anymore. But that's whatever. Number 3, take out or redo the whole Spinner storyline. Now, this isn't just a problem with the epilogue, but it's something that's been bugging me for most of the final act of the story. Very late in the game, Horikoshi decided to introduce this whole discrimination storyline against people with physical quirks that make them look different, right? I mentioned it earlier, but this is one of those admirably lofty goals that the series aims for, because talking about discrimination is not an easy task. It's a pretty heavy topic. And for me personally, I don't think My Hero Academia handled it all that well. The metaphor generally makes sense, but metaphors for racism and discrimination in fiction have always had a history of either missing a lot of the subtleties and nuance or just straight up being offensive, and I think My Hero Academia is no different. I can make a whole nother video on why it was a poor choice to implement this into the story, but most of it just stems from it being too little too late. The story arc should have been set up way more from the beginning if it was going to be included at all. And I know there are hints and foreshadowing, but again, too little too late. Number 4, why did they wait 8 years to get Deku his Iron Man suit? They literally cooked one up for All Might in like a month, so why couldn't they do the same thing for Deku? Especially when he's the hero that saved the world and all his friends are wealthy pro heroes who could easily fund it. Also, doesn't this whole thing completely ruin the message that you set up with him losing One for All? Deku is literally telling kids, oh, don't worry, you can make a difference too, even if you don't have powers. But also not having powers sucks, so I'm gonna jump at the first chance I get to not be a bum-ass civilian. And that also kind of leads into my final complaint. Number 5, why isn't Deku the most famous person in the world? It feels like nobody even gives a fuck that Deku saved Japan and the entire world. I know the story subtly implies that this isn't the case and people recognize him for his deeds. People were complaining that the little kid he meets says something like, oh, I can't believe you're real. But that may just be a translation thing, and it could just be him being starstruck at meeting his idol. So he's not saying I can't believe you're real in the sense that he thought he didn't exist. He's more like saying I can't believe you're really here in front of me. But all that aside, why isn't Deku like the most famous, super rich, mega turbo celebrity Drake, Taylor Swift, Jeff Bezos person in the world? Like I said before, it's fine that he ended up being a teacher because that's a very impactful position to be in and it's thematic, but wouldn't him forming his own hero agency or using his clout and wealth to nurture the next generation of heroes be just as effective? Or more effective? Wouldn't it still be thematically fitting for him to be a quirkless symbol of peace in this way? Instead, Deku just comes across as some nobody who just sits around pretending not to be bitter for 8 years until his friends finally get him his pity suit so he can be rescued from his life of mediocrity. Now, I know Horikoshi is a Spider-Man fan, right? So maybe this is him trying too hard to give Deku the Peter Parker syndrome. If you don't read Marvel Comics, basically across almost all Spider-Man publications, it's an unspoken rule sort of that nothing good can ever happen to Peter Parker, at least permanently. He can never be in a healthy relationship for too long, he can never have a job that isn't barely making ends meet, and he can never be recognized for his good deeds and has to be the butt of the joke for other heroes. Marvel does this to keep Spider-Man as the relatable street level hero that he is, so maybe this is what Horikoshi wants for Deku, but How does that make any sense? If you wanted Deku to get no recognition for his efforts, why have the fight broadcasted to the entire world where literally even the US president is cheering him on? At least Spider-Man wears a mask, so ain't nobody know who he is, but Deku is just out there with a t-shirt with his Japanese looking ass face blasted on the screen in 4K. Again, if he's just a respected teacher at UA, that's fine, because it's not like that's a bad position to be in. But the tone of the epilogue makes it seem like Deku is some loser now. Just the look of bitter regret on his face in every panel tells the whole story. And I guess he has a statue, but it's like, damn, can't he get a cash prize from the Japanese government or something? At least that way he could get his super suit a few years earlier. Or at least let him hang out with his friends. He ain't gotta bang Uraraka, Hatsume, and the ghost of Himiko Toga all at once, but you're telling me none of them even have time to get a beer with him after work? But yeah, that's a lot of complaining, because again, I haven't liked the direction My Hero Academia has been going for many chapters at this point, but that doesn't mean I can't give a legendary series its props now that it's coming to an end. For better or for worse, My Hero Academia has impacted pop culture in an almost indescribable way. Without this show, anime might not be the big media sensation that it is today, at least in the West. This is a series that people do love dunking on, but if you are a fan of the medium of anime, I really think you need to give My Hero Academia its flowers, regardless of if you think it's good or not. We need anime and manga blockbusters like this because again, it helps the medium as a whole. And me personally, I'm a fan of the medium of anime above any individual series, so I like to see any anime succeed because that means the art form is doing well. And of course, the same goes for manga. So, thank you to Horikoshi, and thank you to everyone who worked hard to give us My Hero Academia. I don't care what anyone says, this is an iconic series that'll be remembered for a long time, and it really is the end of an era now that it's over. But yeah, that's all I gotta say. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe, and comment below what you thought of My Hero Academia's ending and or the series as a whole. But don't make it too long though, because ain't nobody trying to read a college essay, so, you know, relax. Otherwise, that's the video. Peace. I don't really know what Horikoshi has said himself, and I haven't been following it too closely, but I am super curious as to what his next project is going to be. Obviously, the immediate concern is that he rests up as long as he needs to get his health where it needs to be, but after that, I mean, some people have said he's gonna do a horror manga, which I would love, and other people have said he might move on from the shonen demographic and pull an Araki, which I think would be dope too. I guess that could be another thing for y'all to discuss in the comments. What do you want to see from My Hero Academia's mangaka next?